Hello everyone and welcome to the 17th video in our survival game series done by Brackies. I am the CEO of Brackies, and in this video we are finally gonna take a look at scripting doors. So door functionality, opening and closing, and also some GUI that will ask the player whether or not he wants to open the door or and tell what key the player needs to press. Also how to delay functionality using the yield wait for seconds, some more on that. And keep in mind throughout this video that this technique can be applied to pretty much anything that you want to open and close or move based on player input. So that could be chests, larger gates, and you get the point. Alright, so as always I've opened up Unity, and you can see that a few things has changed. First of all, I've gone ahead and made a wall and a door. I modeled them inside of Maya, and they're not perfect. There are some mistakes here and there, but it was just a quick model to get something to work with, and they will of course be included in the updated version of the assets pack. So if we go into the imports folder here, you can see that I have the door, which includes both objects, and I have set the scale factor to 0.5, and then I have the door UV with a normal map so that the light will reflect even prettier, and a door wall UV and a normal map for that also. So if we take a look at how I've set it up inside of Unity, we have a game object called the house piece, in which we have both the house door and the house wall. And on them we have two materials. On the door we have one called door UV, and this is just a bump diffuse so that we can apply the normal map to it. And as well we have the house wall, bump diffuse, and apply the normal map. Okay, so that's it for importing it into Unity and getting it set up like I have here. Now let's go ahead and actually make the door. So here we have the house door, and let's go ahead and hit the add component, new script. And also a lot of you have asked what if we don't have the add component button. The add component button was added in Unity 4, so all of the 4 versions will have the add component. But if you don't, you can either go ahead and update Unity or go to the component up here, or right click down here and then hit create and then JavaScript and then drag it on. Alright, so house door, add component, new script, and we're gonna call this door logic. Gonna be a type JavaScript, create an add, double click to open it up in MonoDevelop. And just waiting for it to open. So I think we are there. Cool. Now we are gonna keep the function update for later, but the function start we can go ahead and delete, and just space out the bracket keys in the function update. Cool, so let's start with a variable. No, actually, let's start with a on trigger enter. So new function, and call this on trigger enter, all with capitals. And we want to store some information. We've talked about how these works in earlier tutorials, so I'm just gonna go through it really quickly. So we're gonna call the information the collider, and it's gonna be a type collider. And inside of this we're gonna type if the collider dot tag is equal to player, then we want something to happen. And let's just write a debug.log, and then we can write working. So this code will make sure that if we apply it to a trigger collider, it will check if something enters. It will then store some information on what entered. And in this if statement, it will check if the object that entered has a tag called player. So if the object is the player, and if it is the player, it will just type working in the console window, so to let us know that it actually worked. But one thing, we don't want this applied to the actual house door. We want it applied to a trigger. So I'll just go ahead and remove the component. And if I just go ahead and hit play and run over here and keep on running, you will notice that I can run right through the door. So we want to create some colliders. For this house wall, I think I will use a mesh collider. You could also create a lot of different box colliders to make sure that you get accurate collision. If you want to know more about how collision works inside of Unity and how you can make great collision without being too harsh on the computer, then you can go and watch our mastering collision tutorial. For now, I'm just gonna hit add component, physics, mesh collider. So now we can interact with this correctly. And the door, I'll just go ahead and create a box collider for the door. So physics, box collider. And let's just tweak this a little bit. So we could go ahead and just disable the house wall. And let's have a look. So we can tweak the center settings. And the size of it, scale it down a little on the Y. Maybe a little more actually. Let's drag it down a bit. And to the sides it looks fine, but let's tweak the Z. Oh no, the X to about there, and position it equally in the X also. So that actually looks really fine. I'm just gonna push it down a little more. Cool. So as you can see, it isn't perfect, but it will do. I'm sure it will do. So now let's re-enable the house wall. And when we hit play and run over to the door, we can't run through it. And the same thing happens with the wall. Awesome. Now let's go ahead and make what will actually trigger our player. Be triggered by our player. So let's go ahead and create a new empty game object. So game object, create empty. Drag it under the house door, just so we can center it on the door. So center the position and the rotation, and 1, 1, 1 on the scale. Oh, I selected the wrong object. I selected our enemy. That was not on purpose. So game object, create empty, drag it under the house door. 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1. Cool. Now let's position it the right way. So let's set all of these, set that one to center and this one to global, actually local. And we can make sure it's centered on the door about there. And now we want to create a collider for it. So add component, physics, box collider. And this could be any type of collider you want. Now we can just go ahead and scale it. So we'll make it about as high as the door and as wide. Maybe a little wider actually. And on the X here, we are going to scale it quite a bit, because this won't actually open the door. This will just enable the player to open the door. So we want him to be able to do it from quite a distance. And let's rename this to house door trigger. And to see if the trigger is placed well, we can go ahead and hit play now without enabling the is trigger. And therefore we can see when we collide with it. So from here you are going to be able to open the door. That looks fine. I actually, well, yeah, that looks fine. So let's just go with that. And let's remember to check the is trigger. This is very important. Let's also remember to select the player and tag him as player if you haven't done that already. Now we can go ahead and take a look at the script. So this should be working now because we have tagged the player and we have set the object to a trigger. So now we can go ahead and drag on the door logic. Alright, so let's hit play. And when we enter, we can see that working is being called in the console. Cool. Now let's add to the script. So we are gonna do we are gonna make a variable which is gonna be private because we don't want to actually change it in the inside of Unity. And we're gonna call it draw GUI. And by default, it's gonna be equal to false. Then we are gonna wait a second with implementing this. First, we're gonna make the actual GUI. So let's type a new function. And GUI or GUI is what we use whenever we want something to be drawn on the screen. So we use it for 2D elements. So in this case, we're going to use it for making some text. Actually, a text label. So we are going to have a box around it. Now, GUI elements can only be made through scripting inside of a function called onGUI. And make sure you type it exactly like this with the capital letters. Now, inside of this, we are going to type GUI.box. And then open up a parentheses, rect. For rectangle, open up another parentheses. And then we are gonna need 4 values. The first 2 values will determine where on the screen it needs to be drawn. So that would be first on the width, on the X, where we need it to be on the X axis, and then on the Y. So if I just go ahead and type 10, 10, and then we'll define how long it should be, and there I want to be 102 by 22. That works with the text we are going to be entering. Then end up the parentheses, comma, and we're going to type press E to open. Like that. And end everything up and end it with a semicolon. Now let's see how this looks. So let's hit play. And you can see that it's getting drawn in the upper left hand corner. But we want it to be more like in the center of the screen. You can have it wherever you want. I'm gonna decapitalize the O in the open. And I'm gonna make sure that this is drawn in the center of the X value. And this is done by using the screen.width. The screen.width is simply how long is the screen. And we're gonna make sure that it's halfway. So we are gonna say times 0.5. You could also divide by 2. Then we are gonna make sure that we calculate in the actual width of our label. So we are gonna minus with half of our width. So we are gonna minus 51. Now let's see if this works. it's in the center of the x-axis. Now let's move it a little down on the y. Let's just type 200. Hit play. I'm pretty satisfied with that. Great. Now let's make sure that this only appears whenever we are inside of the range where we can open the door. So this will be done using our draw GUI. So inside of this onTriggerEnter, we're going to type draw GUI equals true. And now we're going to go inside of our function on GUI and type if draw GUI is equal to true. And then make some brackets around our GUI.box. And this will make sure that the GUI is only drawn when the draw GUI is equal to true, and it will be true once we enter the range. So now let's hit play, walk over here, and you can see that now the GUI is drawn. But watch what happens when we leave the zone. It's still getting drawn. So now let's make sure that it will that the draw GUI will turn false whenever we leave the trigger. So create a new function called onTriggerExit, and it's also going to store the collider information. You can store it the exact same way. And inside of here, we are going to type if the collider.tag is equal to player. So it's going to be exactly the same. You can just go ahead and duplicate what we made up here. So if the collider.tag is equal to player, then we want the draw GUI to be false. And remember, this needs to be onTriggerExit. Alright, so when we go into Unity now, the GUI is drawn as long as we stay in the collider, and when we leave the trigger, it's not, the draw GUI turns false and it won't be drawn. Great. So that's it for enabling and disabling the GUI. Now let's make a new function. And this one is going to be the function update. So we have it up here. If draw GUI is equal to true and input dot get key down keycode dot e then open up the brackets, then change door state. So what we're doing here is we are saying that if the draw GUI is equal to true, so if we are inside of the trigger and the player presses the E button, then we want to change the door state, meaning that we want it to open or close. Now, because I've written it this way, the change door state and then open close parentheses and a semicolon, that means that I want to create this inside of a separate function called change door state. You could also create this here, and yet again you couldn't. And I'm going to show you why. So now let's type function change door state, the parentheses, and the brackets. Inside of this, we're going to type, just hold on a moment, we're going to type if door is closed. So here we're going to need a new variable. So let's go up to the top and create a new variable. So this is also going to be a private var. And this is going to allow us to determine whether or not the door is closed or not. So door is closed. And it's gonna be equal to true by default. So if door is closed is equal to true, then we want something to happen. And this is where you can insert your own logic. I'm gonna give you an example of how I would do it. So I would say the door dot animation dot crossfade and then open, or whatever your animation is called. So this requires that you make an actual animation. And the reason for why I write the door is because we are gonna have to actually reference the house door. Because we have this house trigger, and if we just animate this, it's not going to be visible in game. And actually, let's go ahead and drag out this house door trigger under the house piece so that it won't be influenced by the position of our door. So when we animate the door, we want to reference it from the trigger. So let's go back into MonoDevelop and create our last variable. This one is not going to be private because we want to apply it in Unity. It's going to be called var. The door is going to be a type transform. Now we can just go into Unity, wait for the script to update. Oh, I can see we have an error. Door.animation.crossfade says crossfade is not a member of Unity animation. I think I've spelled it wrong. Might be crossfade. Yeah, I spelled it wrong. And so we're gonna do it like that. So remember to capitalize the F. Now we have no errors, and we can see a variable called the door appear in our script. Now we can just drag on the house door. And that is it. Great. So now let's write out the rest of the logic, and then we can create the animations. You could, after the door animation starts playing, also make it play a sound. So we could do the door.audio.play one shot. This would play whatever audio source you attach to the door. So inside of this door here, we could apply a audio component. So we could drag on a door squirking or like an old wooden sound effect or something like that. But for now, I'm just gonna go ahead and not do that. So I'm just gonna comment it out like this. Now let's move on. Door is closed will then be equal to false. Because now we have opened the door, the animation has started playing, and the audio has started playing, so the door is no longer closed. Now we want to wait a couple of seconds, and then we want the door to close automatically. And this is the reason why we are doing it in a separate function, other than just to keep the script looking clean. It's because we want to use what is called a yield. You're gonna type yield space, wait for seconds. Oops, wait for seconds. And inside of the parentheses, we're gonna type, let's say 3. A yield statement cannot be used inside of the function update. That's just the nature of it. And the reason why is because in the function update, it is called every time the computer draws a frame. And so if the function update is slowed, the computer would stop drawing frames. So you cannot yield in the function update. You have to call a separate function to yield. Sweet. Now let's yield the 3 seconds. Then say the door dot animation dot crossfade, and then close. You could also use the open animation again and then just reverse it, though that's a little bit more difficult. Then we could again insert some audio. We could say the door dot audio dot play one shot, like this. But or just dot play. But again, this wouldn't really do anything except add the authenticity to it. So you could leave it there, you can use it. It's up to you. So I'll just leave that commented. And then door is closed equals true. Because now the door has closed again. Let's see if this works. Hit play. Go over to the door. And now we should press E. Now keep in mind that we have still not added an animation. So let's go ahead and make that first. So I'll just quickly save to make sure that we don't lose all of this work. Now I want to select the door, go to Window, Animation, and press the record. It then asks me to add an animation component, which we will do. We're gonna go and save it under the animations folder, call this open, and save. Now I've prepared this door for for making this animation. And I've done that by making sure that the pivot point or the anchor point is in the right side. Actually down here to be more specific. And this way, when I go up here and change the pivot point to pivot and not center, I can just rotate it along the y-axis and it will work fine as a door animation. So let's go under the rotation Y, hit add key, then go move forward about half a second and animate the door. And you can make it open whatever way you want, and you can also choose how much. I'm just gonna write a prefix value of 90 or minus 90 actually. Minus 90. Great. So now if we hit play, the door will open. We can also make it fade a little bit by selecting the keyframe of the start and hit flat, selecting the keyframe at the end and hit flat. Now it should smoothen out the animation a bit. Awesome. Now let's create the close animation the same way. So go to the where it says open here and create new clip. Again, we are going to go under the animations folder and we are just going to call this close. And I'm just quickly going to make it the same way. So this time we'll start at minus 90. We'll move forward and then, whoops, didn't start at minus 90. So we're going to start at minus 90, then go forward half a second, and then go back to 0. And I'm going to select all of the keyframes and flatten them. Like that, and like that. So when we hit play, we can see the door closing again. Now let's hit the stop record and see if this works. Play. And we can see that the door opens all by itself. That's because we have the animation set to play automatically. So select the house door and disable the play automatically. And now we should see it working. So I hit play. walk to the door. It says press E to open. We press E, and we can now move through, and the door will close automatically behind our back. So that's it for making a door open and close. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.